Thank you very much for joining us for the Introduction to Computer Forensic module. So, to start, we're going to start by defining what an incident is. So basically, in order for us to have an appreciation of what computer forensic is all about, we have to have a clear understanding of what is an incident. So basically, an incident, we can say these are events that interrupt the normal operating procedure and precipitate some level of crisis. So the moment I hear about the word an incident, in other words, it's simply something that disrupts the normal flow of activities within an organization or within a system, and then that event has to precipitate some level of crisis. So basically, that is an incident. But in cybersecurity, we are concerned about what we call computer security incident. So basically, a computer security incident, we can say it is something that is unlawful, unauthorized, or unacceptable action that involves a computer system or a computer network. Remember, the moment we talk about cybercrime, cybersecurity, we have to have a computer system or a computer network. So, we usually define a computer security incident as an unlawful, unauthorized, or unacceptable action that involves a computer system or a computer network. But however, as investigators, some investigators, however, discovered that in order for someone to carry out an investigation that is actually that can be admissible in the court of law, we need some form of methodology. So we're going to be discussing with respect to the incident response methodology. So basically, the incident response methodology is a 7-component process, whereby we are saying the first process is what we call pre-incident preparation. When we have managed to prepare before the incident occurs successfully, we move on to detection of incident. Then from detection of incident, we perform our initial response. Then from our initial response, we need to formulate a response strategy. Then, when we've successfully managed to formulate a response strategy, we now need to investigate the incident. But however, when we're investigating the incident comprises of 2 processes, which are data collection as well as data analysis. When we've managed to successfully investigate the incident, we need to report to our superiors or to the person who is on top of the rank as according to our organizational chart. But however, you will discover that from detection of incident up to reporting, there is a resolution or recovery or implementation of security measures. Because however, we do not want, if an incident occurs during the workplace setup, we have to ensure that the business is a going concern. So however, at each and every stage, we need to make sure that we implement security measures. So now, for the incident response methodology, I'm going to try and explain each process or each stage of the incident response methodology so that we have a clear understanding of what an investigator needs to do. So, I'm going to start by pre-incident preparation. So, with pre-incident preparation, we're basically saying there are 2 processes that are involved during the pre-incident preparation. We need to prepare the organization itself as well as to prepare the CSIRT team. So, On preparing the organization under pre-incident preparation, basically there are certain processes or activities that we need to achieve, or that we need to perform in order for us to say we have managed to actually prepare our organization. So, when preparing the organization itself, the first thing that we need to do is we need to implement what we call host-based security measures. You will discover that on our servers, on our system, there are basic security measures that we need to make sure that they are in place. For instance, we need to make sure that our systems they have antiviruses. Our system have passwords. That's an example of implementing host-based security measures. Since we said a computer security incident comprises of a computer system or a computer network, we also need to implement network-based security measures, whereby we are looking at our network and we're asking ourselves, is our network safe from unauthorized users? So as a way of preparing the organization itself, before the incident actually occurs, we need to make sure that we implement network-based security measures. However, implementing those two is not enough. We also need to train our end users. By training our end users, we're basically saying, in the event that an incident takes place, do our users know what an incident is? How do they report an incident? And what basic processes can they do in order for them to actually protect our systems or safeguard our systems from incidents? So all that is done when we train our end users. However, as a way of also trying to prepare the organization itself, we need to employ an intrusion detection system. So, intrusion detection systems are there to actually monitor our system as well as our networks. And if there is an intruder who by any chance wants to access our system, this IDS simply alerts the network administrator or the system administrator that an intruder wants to access our system. So, this is another way of also preparing the organization itself. However, we also need to create strong access control. By creating strong access control, we're basically saying, depending with the roles of individual users within our system, we need to make sure that our access control matrix, or the right user, is given the right roles in order for him to carry out his day-to-day activities within the organization. So, however, access to resources should be limited to only authorized users. But however, we're saying, as our systems, as technology evolves, you will discover that we might have weaknesses or vulnerabilities within our system. So, as a way of trying to prepare the organization itself, we need to perform timely vulnerability assessments, whereby we are maybe we can do this by performing penetration testing, whereby we'll be assessing our systems if there are any loopholes, if there are any flaws, if there are any weaknesses. Then if they are there, we make the recommended suggestions. However, as a way of also preparing the organization itself, we also need to ensure that backups are performed on a regular basis. You will discover that within organization, depending with the organizational policy or the security policy, backups can be done. An organization can perform complete backups or incremental backups. So, as a way of preparing an organization before an incident actually takes place, we need to ensure that backups are performed on a regular basis. So, now that we are familiar with what to do as a way of preparing the organization itself, we also need to look at preparing the CSIRT team, or the Computer Security Incident Response team, as a way of pre-incident preparation of the incident response methodology. So, when we're preparing the CSIRT team, or when we're preparing the Computer Security Incident Response team, we need to ensure that the hardware and software that is needed to investigate the computer security incident is in place. You will discover that in forensics, we're not supposed to use any tools to perform analysis or to collect data. As an investigator, you need to use forensically sound software or tools in order for you to conduct your investigation. So, as a way of preparing the team that is going to handle the investigation, we need to ensure that the hardware and software needed to investigate the computer security incident is in place. However, we also need documentation. Documentation in the form of forms and reports. Like, you will discover that when you're reporting an incident, there are checklists or there are forms that need to be in place in order for one to actually report an incident. And we don't look for those forms when an incident occurs, but we ought to have those forms or those form of documentation in place before the incident actually takes place. However, during my discussion, I've been mentioning the word policy. As a way of preparing the computer security incident response team, we need to have the appropriate policies and operating procedures to implement our response strategies. Policies are what? Policies are organizational laws. So basically, we are saying policies are they actually guide us on how best we can conduct our activities. So, and then operating procedures, they actually give us a workflow, or how processes or activities are supposed to flow within a particular activity. So, as a way of preparing the CSIRT team, we also need to make sure that we have the policies and procedures. Then, the issue of training our staff or our employees is also very crucial as a way of trying to prepare the CSIRT team. Why? Because let's say, for instance, if employees are not trained, employees might compromise the evidence, like by failure to go through the proper handling procedures. So we need to train our employees, on how to perform forensic investigation in a way that does not compromise the evidence that has been collected. So, during the pre-incident preparation, as a summary, we're basically saying during pre-incident preparation, that's where we prepare our organization itself, as well as preparing the CSIRT team. When we feel that we've managed to successfully prepare for the pre-incident preparation, we move on to the second phase or the second stage of the incident response methodology, which is detection of incident. So, on detection of incident, basically we say if we fail to detect an incident, then the incident might go on unnoticed, which is not actually a good thing. So, someone might ask, who is responsible for detecting the incident. So, in order for us to detect the incident, an end user can detect an incident. When I say an end user, I'm saying the person or the employees within the organization that are actually using computer devices within the organization, which is an end user, can be responsible for detection of an incident. The network administrator or the system administrator can also be responsible for detection of the incident. But however, we also have intrusion detection systems or systems. Some organizations have IDS as well as IPS, intrusion detection system, as well as intrusion prevention systems. The IDS or the IPS can also be used to detect incidences. But however, we are saying anybody within an organization or even outside the organization has the responsibility of detecting an incident. So, depending with the organization setup, an incident can be reported in various ways. An incident can be reported via the immediate supervisor. An incident can be reported via a corporate help desk, or an incident can be reported through the use of a hotline to the incident response team. So, basically we are saying, once an incident is reported, as an investigator, we need maximum details about an incident. And in order for us to collect those details, you can either use a simple checklist or a complex checklist. So, a simple checklist can collect information such as current time and date, who or what reported the incident, the nature of the incident, when the incident occurs, hardware or software involved, as well as points of contact for involved personnel. But however, depending with your security policy or with your incident response or your incident policy, some organization might opt to use a complex checklist. So basically, a complex checklist is going to collect more information rather than a simple checklist. And we're basically saying a complex checklist usually consists of 5 modules. So the first module will collect contact information. Then the other module will collect incident detection information, system details information, incident containment, as well as preliminary investigation. So, on contact information, as you can see, it will collect information such as name, department, telephone, other telephone, email, as well as it will also collect individual details of the person who is reporting the incident with respect to his name, his department, telephone, email. So, that's the module on contact information. Then, on the other module of incident response checklist, we're going to ask ourselves the type of incidents. Is it a virus? Is it unauthorized access? Is it denial of service? Then on the location of the incident, it will capture the address, the building, as well as the room number. Then it will also collect information such as on physical security, were there any locks, were there an alarm system, and who was in charge? And then how the incident was detected, as well as is information concerning the incident stored in a protected or tamper-proof manner. So we're basically saying a complex checklist is going to collect information or it is going to have an in-depth level of information. So the other module is going to be an incident response checklist, whereby we're going to capture system details like the system information, the operating system, the network or the IP address, the model connection, and if the system is critical. The other module is going to be on incident containment, whereby we're going to collect information such as who had physical access to the system, etc., etc. So, the complex checklist will also collect information with respect to preliminary investigation, whereby we're asking ourselves what is the source IP address of the attack, what investigative actions have been taken, and does a forensic duplication need to be made. So we're basically saying, as you can see, there is a big difference between a simple checklist and a complex checklist. So as an investigator, when you're investigating, there is need for you to actually decide on which checklist you are going to be using as a way of trying to collect information once or report information once an incident has been detected. So when we feel that we have managed to successfully perform the detection of incident, we move on to the initial response. So on the initial response, we're basically saying during this process, we assemble the CSIRT team, as well as ensuring the incidents, as well collecting ample data via the checklists. It might be simple or complex, as well as assessing the impact. So, during the initial response, we're basically saying we do not touch the system in this phase. What we're simply trying to say is on initial response, this is where we actually interview the necessary stakeholders, such as the system administrator or the business managers, as well as reviewing IDS report, network logs, as well as also reviewing the access control list and the network topologies. When we've managed to actually interview and review our systems, we need to formulate a response strategy. So, basically when we talk about formulating a response strategy, the objective here is to actually determine the best strategy by considering social, political, technical, as well as the business factors. But however, formulating a response strategy is actually a process during the incident response methodology. So, before we formulate a response strategy, we first of all need to consider the totality of circumstances, then consider appropriate responses, as well as take action. So, when we are considering the totality of circumstances, we're basically asking ourselves some of these questions. How critical are the affected systems? Who are the potential perpetrators? Is the incident known to the public? What is the apparent skill of the attacker? And how much system user downtime is involved? So, all of this, we're simply trying to consider the totality of circumstances, or we are basically trying to consider what of the impact of the incident that has actually happened. When we've managed to consider the totality of circumstances, we also need to consider appropriate responses. So, you will discover that we have an incident, we have an example of an incident, we have a response strategy, and we have a likely outcome. So let's say for instance, for an incident such as an unauthorized use, we might have an example of using web computers to surf pornographic sites. And as a response strategy, we might say an investigator needs to perform possible forensic duplication and investigation and interview the suspect. Our likely outcome is that the perpetrator will be identified and evidence collected for disciplinary action, and action can be taken depending on the employee's position or past enforcement of company policy. So, after considering the appropriate responses, we need to take action. And when we're taking action, depending with the severity of the incident, we can either decide to take legal action or administrative action. So, on administrative action, we're basically saying, as an organization, maybe depending on the policy and the severity of the incident, we might decide to just suspend the employee. We might decide to fine the employee. We might decide to fire the employee. So when we take those actions, we say those actions are, we've taken administrative action. But we also have what we call legal action, whereby we are actually escalating the matter to the law enforcement agents within an organization. So those are the response strategies that we want to try and arrive at, whether we're going to be taking administrative action or we're going to be taking legal action. So now, when we've managed to actually formulate a response strategy, we now need to investigate the incident. And as I have reiterated earlier on, during the process of investigation of the incident, during the process of the investigation of the incident, we first of all need to perform data collection, so on investigating the incident is broken down into two processes, which is data collection and data analysis. So on data collection, we are basically saying the investigation of the incident usually involves determining the who, what, when, how, and why is actually surrounding an incident. So, on data collection, we're going to be discussing with respect to network-based, host-based, as well as other individual testimonies. And on host-based or network-based, we're going to be looking at the live volatile data collection as well as forensic duplication. Then on analysis, we're looking at the preparation of data as well as the analysis of data. So, basically on data collection phase, we're simply gathering all the relevant information that is actually needed to resolve the incident in a manner that meets our response strategy. Remember, when we were talking about the response strategy, we were saying, depending with the incident that actually takes place, we need to know if we're going to be taking administrative action or legal action. But before we do that, or we arrive at that matter or that conclusion, we first of all need to also consider the totality of circumstances. We need to consider appropriate responses. Then we can now take action. So, on data collection, we are simply gathering all the relevant information that is actually needed to resolve the incident. Then, on forensic analysis, we are basically examining all the data that has been collected to determine who is the perpetrator of the incident, what the incident is all about, when the incident has taken place, and where and how the information is relevant to the incident. So, on data collection, usually on data collection, there are challenges that are usually faced by investigators. Challenges such as when one is collecting electronic data, the information that is collected has to be performed in a forensically sound manner. Another challenge that is there is the investigator is usually collecting more data than what is actually required. So sometimes this might be strenuous for the investigator. Another challenge is when handling the data, one must collect the evidence in a way that actually protects the integrity of the evidence. So there are what we call proper evidence handling procedures. So this is usually another challenge when one is collecting data. So depending on if the evidence is host-based, network-based, or individual testimony, we're basically saying during data collection, we usually obtain IDS logs, obtain existing router logs, obtain relevant firewall logs, obtain backups, obtain system time and date, obtain backups, as well as also obtaining oral testimonies from our witnesses. Now, on forensic analysis, we're basically saying forensic analysis includes the reviewing of all the data that we have collected. So this includes the reviewing log files, system configuration, trust relationships, web browser histories, email messages, and the attachment, as well as installed applications. So here's a table that is simply illustrating what we do when we're preparing data as well as analyzing data. So when we feel that we've managed to actually successfully perform the investigation stage, we move on to the last and final stage, which is reporting. So the challenge that most investigators face is to create reports that actually describe the details of an incident that are understandable to the decision makers, that can also withstand the legal scrutiny, and that are produced in a timely manner. So usually when we are reporting, we need to document immediately. Documenting immediately is actually important because it actually saves time, promotes accuracy, and ensures that communication has been done or has been performed effectively. Also, when we are reporting, we also need to write concisely and clearly. Basically, we are saying during the reporting phase, we need to discourage shorthand or shortcuts, vague notations, the use of technical jargon, and unclear documentation. And also, when we are reporting, we need to use a standard format. So, as investigators, we also need to develop a format for our reports and actually stick to it. Whereby especially when we're creating forms, outlines, as well as using templates. So, in summary, the incident response methodology is a 7-component process whereby we are saying the first stage is to perform the pre-incident preparation. Then from pre-incident preparation, we perform a detection of incidents, we perform an initial response, we formulate a response strategy, we investigate the incident as well as report the incident. But however, we need to understand that from the detection of incident, from each of the stages from detection of incident up to reporting, we need to come up with resolutions and also implement security measures. So this methodology, if followed, will actually help investigators to perform their forensic investigations.